Hey everybody, Dr. Dan here, and this module is all about Frederick Taylor and Henry Ford. And some of you may know who Taylor is. Taylor is the father of scientific management or scientific manufacturing. So, we studied the American system of manufacturing early on in the semester, and Taylor is really the guy who invented this notion of scientific management, really the first efficiency expert, if you will. So there's a reading about Frederick Taylor that you have to do first, and I think you'll find it interesting because everything we do today as far as efficiencies, whether it's in manufacturing or whether it's in shipping, Frederick Taylor had a hand in that. So when we talk about this notion of Taylorism, we're talking about Frederick Taylor, and I think that'll become clear in the reading. Now, it's appropriate to put Henry Ford in with the same module as Taylor because Henry Ford was a bit of an efficiency expert himself. You all know who Ford is, not the inventor of the automobile, but really a pioneer in American manufacturing with the advent of the Model T Ford and a very successful run on production of the Model T Ford, which was a car that kept coming down in price over the years as Ford learned how to manufacture the car more efficiently. So there's a couple of module objectives for this week. One of them is you need to know what Taylorism is, and the answer to that is it refers to scientific management or efficient manufacturing methods. You also should know that when you read the Ford chapter, that a key to Ford's success was establishing dealerships across the country. I think that's important because this notion of distribution is something we're just now learning about in the early 1900s. And national distribution, again, this standardized idea that you could buy a car and you could set up a dealer network that would sell cars in the same way, was really an efficient way to distribute and sell automobiles. Also, know that Ford was a pioneer when it came to labor. He was one of the first to establish a profit-sharing plan for his employees to give them incentive to work there. And also, of course, he was the first to establish a $5 a day wage, which was a big deal at the time and meant that his employees could actually afford one of the cars that they were building. So again, it's this idea of building this middle class, building this consumer network, and building disposable income in with a new rising blue-collar class of individuals in the early 1900s. Also, know that Ford was inflexible in the end. In other words, he wanted to build a car his way, and he wanted to sell his car a certain way. So he did not sell cars on credit during a time when General Motors did, and he was not anxious to change the model. The Model T was successful. Eventually he came out with the Model A that was a good car as well, but really never had the numbers that the Model T had. And then also understand how General Motors at that time really was more into consumer preferences. In other words, GE or General Motors knew that selling on credit was a key because workers at the time couldn't afford to buy a car without paying for it over time, as we all do today, whether we buy a new car or we lease a car. So GM was one of the first companies to establish buying cars on credit, and finally Ford would come around to it, but he was such an old-fashioned person that he didn't believe in that, and in the end it really sort of hurt his sales and hurt the way consumers came to Ford because they knew that they couldn't buy cars on credit. So there's a lot more to it than that, but if you do the two readings this week, the Taylor reading and the Henry Ford reading, that would be great. And just remember that Taylor is the father of scientific management, and I think you all know who Henry Ford is, so it's an interesting read. Have a great week, be safe, and I'll see you again next week. Thanks.